I would like to introduce our presenters today, Dr. Kathy Rumstetter and Dr. Debbie Ray. We hope you enjoy their presentation.
Great, thank you, Felicia, for hosting and to head to toe, all of you there helping get this going. So my name is Dr. Kathy Rumstetter, and I will be presenting today alongside my colleague, Dr. Debbie Ray from Texas Christian University. We are both recess researchers and advocates and educators. Both of us mainly work in higher ed and consult or work with elementary schools. We're not hands-on on the ground teaching in school, elementary or high school buildings on a regular basis. And we have come together here to you today, representing both our own individual institutions and research and experience, but also the research and experience that comes from our allies and friends at the Global Recess Alliance, which is an international coalition of advocates and researchers and educators around recess and play in schools. So we'll be talking a little bit about some resources from there, but we'll also mainly be diving a little bit into the way recess has occurred, why it's important, and then ways that it can continue to occur even in this time of uncertainty and COVID learning, which is occurring in all kinds of ways. So next slide, please. So I wanted to back us up a little bit. So often we think of recess, and depending where you grew up, where you went to school, how old you are, you might have different experiences and ideas about recess was or is today. So I want to back us up to the idea that recess is a time for children to be playing at school. And I want to give us a little bit of a short dive, not a big dive, into the value and importance of play in childhood development, as well as in adult and human interaction. So this is from Stuart Brown. This is a book he wrote in 2010, and it's just about the idea that play is one of the most advanced ways that we interpret the world. And for children, this is especially important because it allows children to make sense of the world around them and also take in new information and be ready to take in new, more cognitively challenging things when we think about how play and recess at school is so valuable. So, and there's a quote, one of my favorite quotes that I found when, next slide, please. When I was first researching recess, and I am the co-author of the AAP's policy on recess with Dr. Bob Murray, and we started looking into what the value of recess back in 2007. That's how long I've been doing this work. And we were very cognizant of looking at recess specifically, but just knew that we had to at least respect and understand that recess is a place of play. And this is from Joseph Lee from the early 1900s. He's often called the father of the playground movement in Boston. And this is from his book called Play and Education, published in 1905. And it's just about how play is so serious for a child. And then later in life, play as an adult is when you think about when you're working on something and you just forget yourself. That's what play is to a child. It's part of their learning and interpreting the world. And in schools, it's about how they are translating what they are hearing and doing and experiencing. So it really is something that builds children holistically in the whole child model, and also is so valuable to their education. Next slide, please. So I did a presentation last summer for the Ohio chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics up here in Ohio. And this is drawn from work by Pasi Sahlberg and Stuart Brown, and some work that the AAP's Power of Play by Ken Ginsberg was published last in 2018. So this is the idea that we often think of play as really, we call it playtime for a reason. It's frivolous. It doesn't do anything for us. But as I just said, it is really essential to a child's growth and development and educational experience. And this is why, because play really at a molecular level affects the way the brain interprets the world. So we have neuronal connectivity, we have social, emotional, and executive functioning skills that are affected through and during and after play. It allows for the hippocampus and the amygdala to be ready to take in and interpret and process what we're trying children to gain in new information when they're in a more structured classroom situation. So play also promotes this adaptive or pro-social behavior, some of which must be instructed as well. So we model it and we also instruct children in it, but play allows them to practice these skills and practice these behaviors with their peers to really promote that interpersonal creativity and imaginative problem solving we want all our children to be doing and growing into as young adults and then as adults. So we have seen, and it's been documented in research by neuroscientists, pediatricians, and educators, that play supports improvements in executive functioning, in language, in math, social development, physical development. We all talk about physical activity, but that's just one piece of what play and recess provide for our children. And I think importantly now, this idea of agency, that a child has some autonomy. When we look at what play means and what it is, it's an autonomous, voluntary experience. Next slide, please. So, and I want to reinforce that play is not frivolous. This is not what we like to see with little boys, but it's also the way that they like to just interpret and rough and tumble with one another. So sometimes this play can look like it's not necessarily safe, but sometimes it can be also just the way little boys and little girls are interpreting the world. When it becomes unsafe, we need to address it. Debbie will talk about some things with that later on. But I think what's important to note here is that play deprivation is really harmful for our children. And we have increasing prevalence of ADHD, or at least diagnosis of ADHD, and other contraindications for a child's overall health, well-being, and learning. And so it is an essential component of a child's day, both in school and at home. Next slide, please. And then I just want to wrap up this, it's not frivolous kind of idea. In case you couldn't tell, I want you to understand that's a big takeaway, that play is not frivolous. It is essential, that it builds executive functioning, underlies adaptive behaviors at home and in school. It improves language and math skills in school and even in the world. It helps build safe, stable, nurturing relationships that buffer against toxic stress and builds social emotional resilience. Those last two, in the time of COVID, pandemic, quarantining, are essential aspects that we must pay attention to. We have to give space, time, energy, planning, and resources to ensure recess is a time for play that is safe and meaningful for those two very important reasons. It builds resilience and it's a buffer to toxic stress. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about some properties of play. Stuart Brown was a researcher I told you I mentioned earlier from the mid-1960s. He's actually an MD psychiatrist, and many of you may know of his work. And he came to study play by studying, sadly, the killer at the University of Texas Bell Tower in 1966. He was part of an interdisciplinary team. I just think this is a fascinating story, so I'm sharing it with you all. He was part of this team, and they were looking at what was behind this person who would commit such an atrocious act. At the time, it was the largest mass shooting in the history of the United States outside of wartime. So it was really something that the governor of Texas wanted to better understand and prevent. And what Brown and his colleagues came to understand was that that shooter had an extremely play-deprived childhood. And then they looked at other people who were felons and who had committed egregious crimes against their country, their citizens. And they all had this lack of a playful childhood. So Brown dug deeper, and he wanted to understand what makes play. We can't define it as a particular is. It's not just this, but it has these properties. So if you think about a time when you have lost yourself in doing something, to the other person it might seem like it has no purpose. You've chosen to do it. You're totally attracted to doing this thing. You forget what time it is. You forget, I mean, you aren't worried about who's watching you, how you look when you're doing it. And you want to continue to improvise, to make it go on and on and on. It's like that saying, like, dance like nobody's watching. It's that idea. When it's a real playful experience, that's what it feels like. Next slide. And then I want to bring in, related to this idea of autonomy and playfulness and self-direction and loss of yourself in some way, to the ways that and types that we can play. So these are from Pasi Sahlberg. Pasi Sahlberg, some of you may also be quite familiar with him. He's an international educator, originally from Finland. He's currently in Australia. And he is an advocate of this autonomous, unstructured play, not just for little children or middle schoolers, but for all of us. And he builds on Brown's work and gives us the different ways and types of play. There's physical play, which, you know, may be that rough and tumble thing. It may be out hiking like my niece is doing here in South Africa in this picture. It may be just language play, word games. I mean, playing games with like Hangman, for example, or exploratory play where you're out digging in the dirt to see what's in there and finding worms, or building something, taking PVC pipe pieces and putting them together to see how they go, or playing with blocks. And there's fantasy play and social play. And when a child or a young person or an adult is engaged in one of these, often we're engaged in more than one type of play at the same time. So we're not only nurturing our brains, we're nurturing our physical selves, we're nurturing our creative, imaginative, interpersonal selves. So I think it's the next slide. I'm trying to stay with my notes. So I'd like to take a little break. I've been talking for a while now. I don't even know how long. Oh, for like 15 minutes. So I'd like to take a little break from me talking and invite you all to get with a couple of other folks here in the presentation and spend a little time thinking about what I just was talking about this idea of the value of play and how it looks, what is the difference between structured and unstructured play? Are your kids in a in-person school around you? Are they doing virtual? Are they doing hybrid? What kind of play are you observing with your children? What kind of play are you observing with your schools and at schools? And then this question about, should adults get involved in kids' play environments? What does that mean to you, and how are you seeing that experienced? So I'm going to invite Felicia to open our breakout rooms. Debbie and I will be popping into a few of them. And then we will come back as a group. And we do invite you to share what you are experiencing around play, unstructured or structured, and in your environment or schools in the chat, so we can all see what those might be, even if we're not in your breakout rooms. And we will see you back here in about 5 or 6 minutes. All right, well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had some fruitful sharing and conversations. Before I share out what we have heard from some of our colleagues and supporters at the Global Recess Alliance, which is what this slide is about, I would like to see if any of you either had this like aha moment, like I'm not alone, I thought I was alone, or this aha moment of like, that's a brilliant idea, I would like to do that. So something that for an example, I was surprised walking by my local school here in Wyoming, Ohio, which is a little city outside of Wyoming, and we are back in school. I think they're doing some kids in and some kids not. But the kids were out at recess, and they were the littles, like kindergarten and first grade probably. And they were playing on those structures and like running around and like bumping into each other, which was great. Half of the kids were wearing their mask over their face, and half of the kids were not. The teacher was not, but wasn't near them. So it was just interesting to me that like, I don't know what the rules are, but it was just interesting to me to observe this, that they're out, but they were outside and they were playing, and I was so happy about that. And we have learning happening outside between the kids are sitting there with their desks 6 feet apart, but outside. So as an example, what did you share with one another? What did you maybe learn from one another? And I'll open it to the group to see what they may have learned. Debbie, did you have anything in your group that you were with? You're muted. Oh yeah, unmute yourself.
Yes, and then I remembered. Okay, so I was in 2 different groups, and it was interesting. Some are having small group recesses out there. It's not scheduled. They may have, where they do some activity times and so forth, but when it got to unstructured and structured, they were like, I don't know. Well, let's get to that when we get back. So, but there were some interesting things going on. I wish they'd share. They had some good things to say. Everybody's quiet.
I guess you're all afraid. I feel like I'm teaching like 4th graders.
I mean, I can share how I had described the difference between structured and unstructured play. So the way I had described structured was more that there's a set regulation of rules. So something that they need to do in this order in order for the game to work, versus unstructured, which is like that pretend play, imaginative. They don't have to do it a certain way.
And I was struck in the second group I went into well, first in the first group I was in, Brandy shared, she's in New Mexico, she's a counselor and private counselor as well. She shared that with the little kids, they're doing some modeling of pro-social behavior with the littles about what's fair, and it's okay if you don't win. Can you come teach my grandson that? Because he hates to lose at 4. Which I think that's not necessarily structured and unstructured. Is there, maybe that it's appropriate for some littles to have that modeling by us. And then in the second group I was in, Lynn Campanella happened to be in that group, and she's from Canada. I think, Lynn, I'm getting that right, with a group called Playocracy. And I wrote down in the chat, you'll see that sometimes schools forget the purpose of recess. And that's something that I think Debbie's gonna dive a little bit into with some schools. I feel like in some ways school recess got usurped back in the early 2000s by the childhood obesity crisis. And suddenly recess had to be moderately vigorous physical activity or it didn't count. So that's what I have observed in my early research on recess. Recently, in the last 5 years, it's really moved more toward the overall benefits of recess with those interpersonal pro-social behaviors and creativity and imaginative play that wasn't necessarily in the lay jargon in the early 2000s and mid 2000s. So I'm talking a lot. Would anybody else like to share? Otherwise, I'd like to share what we heard from our Global Recess Alliance supporters and teammates. Okay, Felicia, back to the show. So we reached out to our Global Recess Alliance supporters as well as our, one of our members is Jeanette Klassen from Playworks. So this is a compilation not necessarily based on region, but on the way schools are returning and then how recess looks in those schools. So for example, in California, and Oregon too right now, the entire schools, the entire state is all virtual or remote or distance, however you want to use that term. And for the schools that Playworks is working and other schools as well, they're using Zoom or some other platform like we're using here and encouraging kids to do a recess of some sort. And sometimes that's a directed, like here you are going to do it together. And other schools are just using it as like, here's something that you can do and you can choose to do it or not, but go do something. And Debbie will talk about some good ideas for that, especially for those who are at home. And then there's also the schools, as some of you have mentioned, this hybrid model where you have a certain cohort at school, a certain cohort not at school. And the focus is largely on providing recess at the campus in the in-person environment. And then there's such variety in what that looks like. Like I explained what I saw in my neighborhood today. You know, kids are on the equipment, but they're wearing masks, and some kids aren't. Some are not social distancing. Some schools require a mask wearing, some don't. It's a little bit all over the place, even within a district and even by classroom sometimes. And then we have schools like the ones that Debbie's gonna share with us that are operating as normal. And the kids are out there. Some states, like I said, do require masks and some do not. It's just really a variety of what we're seeing. So I think what you'll enjoy about Debbie's component is that she's going to give us some really solid strategies about how to make it happen regardless of where you are. And then where largely what we see with the cohort groups is this idea that I think somebody alluded to, maybe it was you, somebody I was listening to, that there's this like area where kids can play a certain game or activity. And maybe you change by day, maybe you change by when you go out for recess, you go in a different space than you did the day before, or earlier in the day or later in the day. And then we have some good resources for you at the end about modifying games we know for social distancing. So that's what we're seeing. It seems like that's what you're experiencing and seeing as well. But I am going to, oh, my next slide is how do we approach recess? I forgot. I did a little out of order thing. Apologize for that. We kind of revamped at the last minute here. So we want to talk about these strategies and how do we approach recess, not only now while we're in COVID, but how do we continue to carry it forward, looking at this as an opportunity to really more intentionally plan and resource recess for really meaningful interactive play. And I'm going to give you 3 models that we will be referencing and then providing some resources for. Next slide. And those 3 are Playworks. Some of you on this presentation participating are from Playworks. That is a national organization that works with schools. The Recess Project is basically our founder of the Global Recess Alliance, the one who called us together, Dr. Lauren McNamara in Ontario, Canada, actually Niagara-on-the-Lake, Canada. And the Changemakers Guide is a free resource, and that's what this links you to on the not only the rationale behind recess and play, but also how to do it well and how to advocate for it in your school. And then the last one here is last only because Debbie's going to talk at length about how the LINK project out of Texas Christian University works and what it looks like. So with that, I'm going to turn this whole show over to Debbie so she can delve in and explain to you the ways that we can do recess well.
Thank you, Kathy. Nice job. All right. So yes, I'm going to delve in a little bit to what I'm doing in Texas and Oklahoma. And before I get started, though, I want to put a thought out to you on how I want you to think as we move through this presentation. It does no good if you sit here and you listen to what I have to say about what we're doing in certain states or, across even in New Mexico, Canada, California, Kentucky, North Carolina, Texas, wherever it is, Ohio, and you go back and things are still the same. There's no purpose if you don't take some information today, and that's both of our main objective is we want you to take some things with you and figure out who it is that is your go-to person that can help you create some change where right now play, recess, even just breaks from meeting times, breaks from being in all day in services and workshops and meetings. When there's no break within the day, it's not healthy for you and it's not healthy for whoever is running the show. So as we go through this presentation, I'm going to talk about these different pieces, but I want you to jot down whatever nuggets you really get from this piece. And then at the end, let's talk about some of the strategies that you might need to take in order to really start helping our kids in the US and Canada and wherever we're from on this talk today, to bring play as the forefront of what needs to happen in this time of COVID, where emotions and social parameters have really been put at the bottom of the consideration while we think about how are we going to get back in school. So with that, I'm going to get started. So our mission with the LINK project, it stands for Let's Inspire Innovation in Kids. Yes, I'm out of Fort Worth, Texas, and I've been here at TCU for 22 years. I've been in education for 40 years. And in that 40 years, I've taught in the public schools and I've trained teachers at the college level. What I am fascinated about since my journey started in 2012 with this project is that we have lost our way with where we were in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, even before the 60s, but that was my time period of growing up, where we had 30 minutes of recess in the morning and 30 minutes of recess in the afternoon with lunchtime in between. We were only at school for 6 hours, even in first grade. And in that time period, even though we had a standardized test, it was not standard as in trying to come up with a grade, a score for whether you were doing well or not. It was strictly there to make sure that they knew where to work with you on strengths and improvements needed in your developmental journey through elementary school. So when I started looking into this and took my trip to Finland and met with Pasi and really started deciding what we needed to do differently in the US, I realized that what was missing is the play, the unstructured time, the recess that was going on that was not going on in schools. So the mission of this project is to bring the whole child back to the school setting. And right now, I feel like we do a really good job of harping on the cognitive side of things, but we don't do a very good job of bringing back the social, emotional, and physical sides of things. So next slide, Felicia. Thank you. So this is our team right now. We are growing. I have 3 PhD students, 4 master's students, and 6 to 8 undergrad students who are all interested in what we're doing in schools. What I like about that is that will be the step-off point to more people knowing how to do recess more in a framework perspective and not just a school perspective. What we won't thrive on if we continue in the part of one school at a time is that somebody new comes in, a principal, a superintendent, and I know I'm using language that's US, and I apologize, Canadians, on what y'all have in your areas, or maybe even in the Northeast, Northwest, even in US, but superintendent is the one that's over the school district. The principals are the ones that are running the schools, but when those people change in and out, guess what changes? Do you get recess or not? Do we spend more time on technology or less time or whatever that may be? So for me, it's about building a framework, a nucleus around a district, and making sure that we embed the fundamental pieces that go to make sure that change is for the better, for the long term, that we become the culture that we once were around the fact that play needs to be, especially in elementary schools, in a very dedicated way to unstructured play. But as you move into middle school and high school, there still need to be play breaks. Those play breaks still need to be outside, but those play breaks may look a little different than they do in elementary schools. Okay, next slide. So we're in Texas and Oklahoma, and you probably saw on the last slide that we're in 38 schools, 8 different school districts in Texas and Oklahoma. Texas is a big place, so to be in 6 school districts in Texas is not a lot, but at the same time, to be in full school districts, which we're in 6 full school districts, that's pretty good, being that we started in 2012 and where we are now. What does that mean? We have 4 unstructured play breaks a day, 15 minutes each. All teachers from a grade level go out at the same time. Now let me explain it from a pre-COVID and then a post-COVID. So I'm explaining pre-COVID right now. I'm explaining no masks, everybody knew their role. At 9:40 in the morning, grade 1 went outside, all classrooms at the same time. They all had their role and how they got out there. And the transitions were what I call the secret sauce. I mean, you have to have very intentional transitions to do this, but once you're outside, you got that 15 minutes to play, unstructured. Everybody is self-directed and self-choice, with making sure that the safety is there for all children, just making sure that everything is safe. But we also added another component, and that component is, it's very important for us, when you're rolling out 4 unstructured play breaks a day, that these kids are getting some good character skills, some good character training. And so we have a character curriculum called Positive Action that we use in our schools. And it's very powerful. It works off of 6 character traits: honesty, respect, confidence, self-esteem. Let's see, what am I missing? Honesty, trust, empathy, the big one, empathy. We don't teach to bullying, we teach to empathy, what it is to really be understanding of one another and treat each other with these other character traits. So as we roll out, those lessons are daily. We do 15-minute lessons. We don't, but the teachers do 15-minute lessons daily. And the training that goes ahead of that is 3 full-day trainings with teachers and administrators to roll it out in a school or schools all at the same time. And they'll start day 1 in the fall with this particular intervention. Well, that's great. And boy, would it be nice if COVID hadn't hit. I mean, we'd all still be doing our 4 unstructured play breaks a day, right? So the question was, would this continue once we got into the problem with COVID? And, you know, as a researcher and someone who is very much, you know, advocating for outside is the best place to be because it builds the immune system. And I'm just going to throw a couple of things at you. D3. What do we know about D3? What we know is that if we're in the sun for at least 15 minutes every so often throughout the day, we're building our immune system hugely. What we also know is that when kids are not outside, whether it be minimally or not at all, that their immune systems falter. And as a result, what do we see? Allergies, asthma, chronic diseases, type 2 diabetes, obesity, stress, anxiety, depression. All these things start coming on. I'm preaching to the choir. I know I am. Social workers, nursing, you know, the health people that are here. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but D3 is important. And the more we can get in and really work, make sure these kids are outside, the better. And so I would hold back. I'd let the administrators talk, the superintendents talk, make sure that they were deciding on plans that were going to happen with COVID. And then I'd say, can I be part of the discussion? And they say, yeah, we need all hands on deck here. What are we going to do? And so I was part of every discussion that were linked schools at the time. So opportune time to be part of discussions? Absolutely. Was it good to have these things in place before we started? Absolutely. So next slide, please. So what we have now is that 2 large school districts in Texas who are completely engaged in all schools on deck. So 16 schools in one district, 7 schools in the other are still doing 4 unstructured play breaks a day in the schools right now. The 2 in Oklahoma, both rural school districts, started August 17th, and nothing is different. They rolled out the 4 recesses. They haven't had any COVID cases. They don't have masks on when they're outside playing. They don't have masks on when they're in the classroom. The only time they have a mask on is if they're in closed quarters in the hallways, going to the bathroom, going down the hall to recess, or going to a cafeteria. In our 2 that are large school districts in the state of Texas, they are also 4 unstructured play breaks a day. They're going in what's called a family or pod mindset, which some of y'all have talked about as well. And what I mean by that is if you're part of a classroom, that's your family or your pod. And that pod travels together. Now, one of the school districts, that family or pod goes, let's say there are 4 classrooms. Each classroom goes to a different play area on the playground, and they stay with their group. With the other school district, they go out in 2 classrooms together, transitioning down the hall. And when they get outside, they're able to play among their peers. Now, this is huge because in what I teach with the groups that are doing Link is that it's important that our kids are able to socialize across the grade level, not just with their classroom, because it's important for language, it's important for socialization skills and so forth to be able to do that. So with these kids being able to really get out there in one district and socialize, wonderful. But with the other one, it's still good. They're getting to go outside. They're still part of that 4 unstructured play breaks a day. And it's really relieving some of the stress and anxiety that these kids have had. Mind you, all of the districts are still doing, whether it's virtual or on campus, they're still doing the positive action curriculum. They're teaching that 15 minutes each day, virtually or on campus. And off campus, virtually, they're still doing their recesses a day, just like they were before. The sign that you see on this, this slide says, inspire all to play, love, learn. This is at a pre-K campus that we just launched this fall. They have 16 different instructors at the campus for the pre-K campus. It's a campus that used to be an elementary campus, so you can imagine it's a huge campus. But they all have their classrooms. They all go outside. They have 4 different areas, actually 5 different areas for play. One of the areas is in the bottom part of the slide here, where you can see the water station, but they also have other things around there. I just kind of showed you, one of the things that's out there. They disinfect their hands, but not the equipment. They use all equipment. They just decided that Sun is going to take care of the germs on the equipment, and it's disinfecting hands. So if they move from one piece of equipment to another, they just disinfect and they move over, they play again. Some of them aren't playing on equipment. They're out in a field and they're just looking for worms or chasing butterflies or digging in the dirt or setting up a campfire, or not really, but just, putting stones and sticks and things like that together, as you might notice. One of the things, because we have so many nurses and social workers and health professionals on here with trauma, and I know that you're working with kids that have traumas, this is one of the best things for them to be in the outdoors, because that is a natural parasympathetic nervous system response for them, to be out there where they can do the target and field focus, switching in and out, and be able to align with moving back and forth with social skills with other kids. So if you're able to take even some of the things that I say and say, well, in my environment, I'm going to work with kids in a play environment, take them outdoors to do that. That's going to be the best thing that you can do as you go through. Bad weather, we do come inside, but we try to get near windows when we can for that. And we're still going to use the same equipment that we do when we're outside. All right, next one. These are kind of our rules. We have 103 degrees as our hot temperature. That's the field temperature of when we can be out. And that's the National Weather Service and the Center for Disease Control, who have said that as long as you're out less than 20 minutes at a time with the humidity factor and the ozone layers, as long as the field temperature is not more than 103, you can be outside for 15 minutes, which is what we're doing. And then on the other end, you're going to say, well, I wouldn't get out at all in Canada if it was 13 degrees. Go ahead, lower it lower. I'm fine with that. Put it down at 0, 20 degrees below, 30 degrees below. I'm fine. Y'all have better equipment to wear outside. Down in Texas, Oklahoma, we don't have heavy enough gear to put those jackets on that will protect us in the 13 below or whatever it may be. But just make sure that whatever you set your temperatures at, that they're dressed accordingly for whatever those temperatures are. We do not allow technology on the playground for the teachers or the kids. Now, one more thing I'm going to tell you is we also don't allow balls on the playground. You're going to say, what? Why no balls? And the reason for this, and I'm just going to be real short on it because I'm running out of time, but in the US, a ball represents a sport. It doesn't matter what ball is out there, the kids are going to gravitate to sport. So we have taken it away not only for conflict with kids. In 15 minutes, they spend more time arguing about which team they're going to be on than they actually get in playtime. And I am all about unstructured play, which is give them the time to collaborate with one another, play by themselves, choose what they want to do, and not feel pressured to have to play a certain way. And so these are the things that have created the kind of surroundings that I have them in. A ball does not have to represent that though. And with some of you being social workers and nurses and health individuals who are working with one-on-one time, a ball is fine. It's just that the environment that we're in a school setting with large groups of kids, this is what we've chosen to do. The technology, it is ruining our kids' eyes, the vision, being able to see, the clarity, and the distance. It's also messing with the neurological connections that they have. We want them to have strong, vibrant neurological highways is how I describe it. And if these kids are on technology all the time, it's scrambling the brain to the point that it's really hard to unscramble it once that technology has taken place. We have addictions at 2nd and 3rd grade with what they're doing. And then we also don't allow structured things like puzzles and things like that on the playground. All right, that sets us up for the next slide here. So for safety purposes, we don't ask them to wear masks outside. They take them off during COVID times. We continue with, we have water bottles that kids use, but we don't let them take them outside. They just play outside and then they come back in and they use their water bottles in the classroom. Instead of using the water fountains or water sources in hallways, they just use water bottles right now. And then some schools are limiting the number of kids on a particular piece of equipment, but like in other schools, they're not really limiting that. It's just limited by the pods or the families that are working together. It is free play, and we do have disinfectant stations for them to use while they're out there. Next slide. So I have a video, and I think, let me go through the rest of my slides, and then I'm going to come back to it. But what the video does is it's a video of me giving instructions. It's about 6 minutes long with parents on how to do recess at home. And what I'll do is, if I don't have time to share it today, I'll make sure it's on YouTube, and I'll share the YouTube with you so that you've got that and you can see it again at another time. But I hope I can come back to it. All right, next. So parent loose parts guidelines. If parents are like, what do I do? I don't have to usually worry about this, you know, or here's what my video says to a certain extent. I see home recess with 3 or 4 versions of what could be the scenario at home. Let me give you the easiest one first. The easiest one is a family lives in a home structure, individual home structure. They have a front yard and a backyard, or a park just right across the street or down the street. And the parent's home, and the parent says, okay, it's time to go out and play, go. And that's it. That's easy, right? We don't have to worry about what they're doing. They're out there either in their front yard, their backyard, at the park, and they're playing, and everything's cool. That's the easiest. The next one is they don't have a real safe environment outside, but they can be outside on a patio or a front porch or a balcony. And it could be an apartment, it could be a hotel, it could be you know, some type of home environment, but it's more inclusive of dual homes or whatever. And with them, they have more closed-in areas to play. Parents may be there or may not, but they have a safe environment. It's still outdoors. And with them, they're going to have things that are more, they can do it right there in a spot where they're playing. The next one is indoors, but by a window. And the last one is the parents don't feel it's safe even to be by a window. And so they're inside interior with no windows, no outdoor sunlight exposure, no nothing. These are the kind of things I talk about on the video. But the loose parts, these are things that they might already have at their homes or in their locations where they live. They could be put in a box or in a bucket or outside in a certain area. And so I put these all up here of things that they can do. And it goes back to what Kathy talked about with different play experiences that they may be in. We have others on the Link website. We have a parent resource page. We actually just uploaded a brand new website that has a much more interactive for all kinds of things out there. And you can also reach out to me through that project website to contact for all kinds of things. So you can just send me information for other questions, and you can talk that way as well if we don't get to today. Next slide, please. All right. The resources that you have available to you from each of our areas are linked here on where you can go and what you can see. But we have strategies on the Global Recess Alliance page. Playworks has strategies as well. The Recess Project has resources, who Kathy mentioned this just a little bit ago from Canada, Dr. McNamara, and then Asphalt Green Games for social distancing. So those are there as well for you to be able to see some things that go across age development from little kids all the way up through high school. And let me just say, all the way through us. If I were to ask you right now, what do you do to play? Don't tell me if it, don't tell me anything that is not, I shouldn't hear on public TV. But to play means to do things that are enjoyable, that bring happiness, that make you laugh, and don't necessarily have rules associated with them that block you in to win or loss, okay? That you can really be successful at whatever that is. So I'm just throwing that question out. I hope that you'll think about it. What do I do to play? And if you don't play, let's start playing now. It's never too late. All right, next slide. All right, so at this point, we're gonna go back into breakout rooms for a second. And what I want you to focus on this one is, how do you get kids involved in, and let's not just say recess, how do we get involved right now in play experiences, whether it be at home, at school, a hybrid setting where they may have to go home, may have to come back to school. How do you help move this forward? Just like I said when I started this, how do we move this initiative forward so that these kids will have recess or unstructured play or opportunities to have play in whatever setting that they're in? All right, what should recess look like? I've talked a little bit about it, but let's talk some more. I think these are dialogues that we need to have, communication that we need to have about what play and recess should look like. And then how do you approach your colleagues to put this as a top priority out there? And I know sometimes we can go at it with, we're all going to do this, but how do we really do this? Let's talk about it. All right, see you in a few. One of the things that we were talking about in the breakout rooms had to do with, how can we make a change? How can we make a difference out there right now in what's going on? And I'd like to open that up for just a second to others if you'd like to share anything. We're going to get to some question and answer in just a second, but I want to, if anybody wants to talk about what was talked about in your groups, that's great.
Yeah, I think one thing that came up in our group that I was really excited about was the chance for students now, because of COVID, to have more in vivo experiences. So like we had mentioned trains in ours. So it's usually kids would learn about how trains work from watching a slideshow or the teacher talking about it and watching a video about it, versus now, because kids are home and have more flexibility in their learning, the parents could just take the kid on a train ride and you can learn about trains that way.
That's a great idea. Great idea. Anybody else?
So this was something that came up for me, and I'm very passionate about this. And we were talking about the, how do we create a change, and that sometimes teachers kind of get locked in a certain mindset of, I've got to do this, and I'm pressured to meet curriculum requirements and everything, but we're kind of pressured to have to do that through admin. And so with district, having to go there and say, hey, this is what's really important here. SEL is extremely important. And I've been talking to teachers about, the very foundations, like we really need this and we're missing that piece. So how do we get the upper level to get on board with what really needs to happen so that these kids are having those needs met? So that's the toughie.
It is. It's very tough, but it's one of those things that I loved when Iris was talking about that in the group, that I just forced entry into the classrooms, and then all of a sudden the teacher's like, oh, okay, let's make that work then. But as we were talking about scheduling, being intentional about scheduling is probably the most important message that I have today for y'all, is that you have to be intentional. And as I was talking about with one of the groups, if administrators are not on board, it's very difficult to be intentional about something as one. But if you can get a group of you on board and say, we've noticed a difference, can we try this? That may make a difference for you. Okay, so those are things to think about as you go through. The quote that's on here right now is, play is often talked about as if it were a relief from serious learning, but for children, play is serious learning. And I have to say, in ending with what we've been talking about today, you know, Fred Rogers was very, very insightful with what he did through his times and how he introduced play into his show on TV and the way he lived life. One of the things that I think Kathy and I both want to leave you with is COVID can be a positive for us in being able to try to change the way that we've done things in the past as we move forward, and really trying to set the scene a little differently as you come back into your settings with the kids at some point. But the other thing is, use your resources out there. You've got quite a few of them to help you with your kids at home virtually, to help them have some playtime right now that gives them that opportunity that they haven't had, and help really put them in a place where when they come back, they're more available with their mindset to want to play as well. These are things that I think are all important as we move forward. But Felicia, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Kathy and I thank y'all very much for being on today and being part of our presentation. This is our information that you can reach us if you want more answers or even questions from us to you, or whatever it might be. So thanks again.
I'm muted. That's that thing again. So thank you again, Dr. Rumstetter and Dr. Ray, for the wonderful presentation and your generous support of our school health community. We are going to end with a poll here really quick. Let's get that.
Well, we're not officially ending. We're doing the poll, and then we
Not yet. Right.
Q&A after that.
We're going to make sure you're still here and present and then, of course, again, a link for the evaluation will be emailed to you within 48 hours. After completing the evaluation, you'll be redirected to a page with your certificate. So if you are here today for a CEU credit, that is how you will earn them and receive the information. Of course, if you have any questions or any trouble, please feel free to reach out to us. All right, it looks like we got everybody here. And we'll go ahead and open it up for Q&As. If you would like to stay or if you need to go, you are more than welcome to head out. But we will open it up for Debbie and Kathy to do a little more one-on-one questions.
And you can either type your questions into the chat. I've been kind of watching that as Debbie was presenting, and she was watching it earlier. Or just raise your hand or just start speaking. Well, I'm going to begin with a little something to kind of add to what you were saying, Debbie, and something that you had said, Iris, as well. I think when we look at when schools are in person, whether that's part of the school or all of the school, we can be real intentional about scheduling for recess. We can be real intentional about putting resource to it. What I think is going to be, I see your question, Diana, I'll come right back to it. What I think the additional challenge is both preparing parents, and Krista in my second breakout room was talking about how she's doing presentations for parents to intentionally promote play with their children. But I think that's something else that teachers need to be equipped and thinking about. And this is something you can do on your own. You don't have to wait for your district to do this, especially when you're doing like hybrid learning or fully remote learning. You just set the stage and say, hey, today we're going to play outside, or we're going to play on any one of these ways that Debbie has offered in the way of resource for parents. Can also be things that teachers can say, go outside and do this, or sit by a window and do this. And you don't have to do it when I say to do it, because I'm not going to have you on screen all day. I hope, 6 hours of screen time would kill anyone. But just something that we need to be intentional in our direction of go out and play. And that's something I think we can each do every day for ourselves and for our children that we're interacting with. And then
Kathy, yeah. One of the questions was, how do we get middle school and high school teachers on board with intentional play? I'll start it and then jump in. So here's the thing about middle and high school kids. They have been typically not playing for the sake of play for years. And so to just start trying to get them out for unstructured play is like asking for trouble, because they'll do everything you didn't want them to do instead of what you want them to engage in. But here's how I would suggest it, and this is what I talk to a lot of people about across the country, is you have to draw them to the area that you want them to play in. If you have a sandbox, or you have I'm serious, it's just like little kids. If you have a slide that lands in a sandbox, you're going to have middle schoolers and high schoolers in the middle of the slide going down to the sandbox. They'll just plop right in the middle of it. If you have a sand area that they can just go out and play in, they'll do that. Hills, they love to just sit on the side of the hill. When we say or think about unstructured play, we think, oh, well, they need to be moving. But in reality, they may just need time to socialize. They may just need time to be outdoors and sit for a minute and ponder their thoughts. So to have little spaces where they can do that among the areas where they can actually run around and play would be great. But to have some other little game things, remember I said balls are not a bad thing on middle school or high school area playgrounds. If you have things like one of those multiple volleyball nets that has a soft playground size ball, but it's very light in size. And you can just use that to go from one net to the next across. Being able to do what we do at football games, which is try to toss the beanbag in the 3 holes of a board, and you can make those yourself. But those are all things that will engage kids in play. And it doesn't take a lot of effort, but it just takes creative thinking of what kids would be engaged in out in the space. I can help y'all with that. I've got different ways to do it if you're interested in more.
So I'm going to add to that, Debbie, and I'm going to put this, I don't know if you guys can see this. Remember this part of the slide when I talked about Brown's properties and Posse's types of play? We get kind of stuck thinking that play is just for little kids, but especially when I think of exploratory and social play and language play. I mean, I can remember like that game where you like clap your hands, you do concentration, mispronunciation. Like that's just a game that we play. Like, so I think this is where I want to go back to one of the things that Debbie had prompted us in our discussion group in this last breakout. How do we engage the kids? And in my first breakout room of the second time around, Lynn said, sometimes adults are the biggest problem. We tell them what they need to play. And when you have middle schoolers and high schoolers, they can come up with cool ideas and then let them run with it. Hell, give them sidewalk chalk to go outside and draw on the ground. Let them go out and just sit on the hill. But I think these are things, especially with middle schoolers and high schoolers, that the students can be a part of the solution. And then the teachers go, oh, it's not that hard, because I'm pretty sure that most teachers in middle school and high school are very concerned about what Debbie just said. Kids are going to whip out their phone, their device, and start doing one of these. We don't want them to do that. They're doing too much of that anyway. but you know, if they have a middle school student council or a middle school or a high school student council, they can be part of this process, and to be part of your team to create opportunities for play. And yeah, so I just remind you of the properties: voluntary, purposeless, but it's going to look different for every person. And that's what I love about it. You know, I might like to socialize on the hill, and I might like to hang out in my backyard at my patio. Quality play to elementary students. Yeah, so Chad's having to leave us, but I think we will, the resources we have about a virtual school, I think, Debbie, your ideas of having, you know, these sort of play buckets that you can have, encourage parents to create. And I do think about so many of our kids where I am in this inner city schools of Cincinnati. We have about 30% homeless population, and we have not talked about that population right now. And that's a very different challenge that we don't have time to dig into, but it's something that we do need to think about. How does that look when you don't have the roots and the security of space by knowing where you're going to be? So I don't have an answer for that. If you all do, I hope that you share it with me, because it's something that we struggle with our inner city kids.
You know, one of the ideas that I had thought about for homeless populations, whether they're living out of a car, they're living on the street somewhere or whatever, is to have cities start to put some things in place, or counties, where during the day there are some play spaces that have been developed so that these kids have a safe place to go to and be part of a play environment. But the other idea is to have, if the city could do this, have a couple of people out there that are monitors to make sure that the play environment stays safe, and that we don't have somebody that's a predator to come in and try to do something that shouldn't be, that isn't appropriate. So it's making sure that you're hitting both sides of it, that it's a safety parameter for them, as well as things that they can do out there and engage in. But you're right. I mean, that's stuff that we've got to educate cities and counties on as well.
Hi, y'all. This is Joni. I'm in Virginia. I want to share two things. The first being that thank you so much for advocating for what children need. I'm one of those school administrators, but I had a career as a teacher, thank God, and as a parent and a grandparent now. So I think I have a perspective that it's amazing how one person can influence another group so that it can grow. And the parent piece is so incredible. We started doing the 45 minutes and 15-minute 4 recesses a day. And the very first week we did it, I didn't know what we were getting ourselves into. And the parents came to me and they said, oh my God, can you please do this again? My children go home and sleep at night. I don't know what you're doing, but please keep it up. So parents will support us. And this is a high poverty. Every one of our kids, the 400 kids, are free and reduced lunch. So in other words, we don't have a whole lot where we're at. And finding ways to repurpose things, like, and again, like you said, making sure it's safe, but car tires can do some interesting things. Kids create all kinds of ideas when they're given the chance. The last thing I wanted to say, and this is where with this COVID thing, and I'll stop really quick, teachers and administrators are having to deal with two very polar opposite sciences. You've got infectious disease sciences and best protocol practices, and then you've got early childhood, and like you guys are saying, what's necessary for healthy child development and well-being. And the two of them are at odds sometimes. And what we have found, we've taken it really simple. We are a school. We're not a school in a hospital, and we're not a hospital in a school. And that's been easier for us too, because we've had children in our building since September the 11th the 8th, since the hybrid model. But I just need to kind of cheerlead for teachers and administrators who are trying to struggle with this, and also to recognize that parent voice. Thank you. Thank you much.
Good job, Joni. Thank you.
Joni, I don't know if you just popped off, but I just want to make sure I got this. I think you said we are a school. We're not a school and a
Yes.
hospital. We're not a hospital and a school. We
Yes,
are,
ma'am.
that has to drive our decisions.
And I had to go through school board and superintendent to say, because they were like, hey, Joni, you're going to have to get rid of your recesses. I was like, that ain't going to happen. And that's exactly what happened. And it is so, oh my gosh, I get exhilarated to just know this is the right thing for the kids. I know it's right. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
That might be my favorite quote of the day.
I know.
That along with the way the problem with recess is the adults.
Yeah.
You are not taking my recess away.
I mean, I often share this story that when I first started doing research on recess, and this is again back 2007, 2000, even as recently as if I'm not on my own computer and I do a Google search for recess in the United States, of America, what pops up is Congress takes recess. Our legislative bodies take recess, and I'm like, but we don't give one to our kids.
Well, the daggone criminals get an hour of daylight, 24 hours. If you're, unfortunately, if you're whatever I can't get the letters right, but they get an hour. Why aren't we giving kids an hour? Goodness.
It's a little crazy. So, any other questions or thoughts, ideas to share with the group? Sounds like we've got some folks that had this, looks like we had some folks pop off, but we'd love to hear from you and your ideas and questions. And of course, we'll be here for if you have other questions as well.
Using animals as your recess. At home, we have horses. So my 5-year-old grandchildren just love horses, and they will go out there and they can be out there for hours if I would let them. Yeah, animals, dogs, we have dogs. They just love playing with the dogs. I mean, at school sometimes here in Espanola, New Mexico, we try using our therapies is animal therapies, and they take a lot of our special needs children to animal therapies. And heck, why can't we bring the animal therapy to the school?
Great points.
Excellent. Yes. And one other resource that I'll ask Felicia to share with all of you in the follow-up is somebody responded from our Global Recess Alliance. His name is Yethek Holliver, and he is down in Australia. I say down under in Australia. And he wrote a piece about pretend play and pretense, and asking children to think about, like, well, how would Batman respond to this? Who's your favorite superhero? And then using the skills and the attributes that we see those superheroes demonstrate in their cartoons or their movies or whatever they're doing. And then, okay, well, that's how Batman would respond. How about if you apply that to when you are, why don't you be like Batman while you're doing this activity? Or why don't you be like the sleeping PJ Masks guys and do this activity? So we're helping kids identify behaviors that we want in them through the idea of pretend play, and so they're exercising both creativity and then practicing those skills. It's a beautiful article. I'll make sure that I send it to Felicia to share with all of you. And then Debbie and I are of course available for, and we have Global Recess Alliance members who are from Australia, the UK, a couple in California, Oregon, New York, Debbie's in Texas, I'm in Cincinnati, Olga Jarrett's in Georgia. So regionally, we have some folks that might be able to help you where you are regionally, but we also have various areas of expertise in our research. Lauren McNamara, the one from Canada, she's very focused on dealing with trauma and healing through recess and addressing how do we make a safe, inclusive recess for all children. So if you're interested, please let us know and we'll connect you to the right person if it isn't one of us.
All righty, and I think that about wraps it up for us today. Thank you guys again for joining us. And if you need to reach out or have any questions, please reach out to Debbie or Catherine or myself. My email's on the screen. Hope you guys have a wonderful day and got a lot of information. I know I did.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Thanks so much for hosting us, Felicia. And thank you to Head Teacher 365. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Felicia. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. It's been
All
great.
right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, all. Go out and play. It's time.
That's
Mhm.
right.
I really wish Debbie could have shared her video.
Oh, if anybody
Do-
wants to hang around, I don't have it either.
I can, if she can put it up, I can send the link out if she sends that to me.
Yeah. So part of why those of you that are still with us, why we didn't, Debbie had to keep it, is it was too large to put into the presentation, but it's about 6 minutes and it's her like speaking to parents. But I think especially Chad, you had asked about like, what am I going to do if I have to go virtual? How do I help parents get ready to do this stuff at home? How do I do it while I'm teaching? And she walks through more detail on those different places and ways that recess might happen. And I know I'm working with a school here in Cincinnati, and one of the parents was like, he's a realtor, but he's connected with the Home Builders Association, and he happened to meet with a construction guy, and he told the construction guy, we really want some PVC pieces and pipes just so we can have them on the playground or in little playground bins and buckets, like this 5-gallon buckets that you use for like painting and drywall and stuff. Just throw pieces of PVC pipe in there. Kids can't get hurt on it. I mean, if they whale it at themselves or each other, they could, but.
Use a pool noodle.
Yeah.
They're giving out pool noodles here instead. You know, it's a little more squishy. A little
So just different things that that's what Debbie's going to share on her video. So I'm sure she will make it available for YouTube and send a link to you. So thank you. And Chad, let me know how else we can help you. And Lauren's right up there with you.
Oh, that's just kind of things I'm looking at. Like I said, I haven't experienced the virtual teaching yet. We're still going. And like I was explaining to my group, our kids are all in bubbles by classroom. So I have 13 different classes here, and those kids are allowed to do whatever they want in their bubble. So when I take a class out for PE, it's full PE, but I have to disinfect the equipment before the next class comes in. And I was saying I'm fortunate enough to teach in a small school. You know, here I have 200 students, and we're considered a big school, and that's from pre-K to grade 6. And the amount of field space I have outside, I have a huge playground. I have 3 soccer fields behind me and a baseball diamond, so we can really spread our kids out. Just like today we did Terry Fox with the whole school, but just separated on different parts of the field, all spread out so that they weren't going into other people's bubbles, as we say. So I was just kind of under the impression that how do you still provide that quality recess, that quality PE time if I go virtual? Yes, I can stand in front of the screen doing jumping jacks, push-ups, and have to do that 13 times throughout the day with different groups. I'll be in great shape. But like we said, how do we get them outside? How do we make sure parents realize the importance of getting off the screen? And I myself want to give them that break to go out and explore and play.
So are you in Quebec?
I am. Yeah, I'm about an hour south of Montreal.
Because I knew that Quebec never closed. So, and they actually, Quebec was the province where back in March or April, there was the picture sent around the world that went viral of the kids at recess in little boxes. I don't know if you saw that picture. They were painted in 6-foot boxes.
I did not see that picture.
Oh, it's hard. This is not recess, people. But that quickly, when it went viral, that school changed what they were doing, as far as I understand it. But I was just thinking, the school I work with, there's a PE teacher there named John Brennan, and I will connect you to. Granted, they are doing virtual right now, and he's been doing virtual PE since the beginning of the school year for the past 4 weeks plus. So he might be able to share some ideas with you. And we have some good field space as well. Are your kids getting recess where you are?
Yeah, so like it's funny when I listen to you guys in that sense, I feel quite fortunate up here. So my kids get 20 minutes of recess through the day. They get 30 minutes of outdoor time during their lunch, and they get 45 minutes of phys ed every day except for 1 day out of 5.
Holy cow.
So
Wow.
so they're recessed. So they essentially have 40 to 50 minutes of unstructured play and a 45 phys ed period per day, where my phys ed is I've been outside as much as possible so far, just based on weather.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, that's a great model. Like I said, I will definitely just if you can either reach out to me. Wait, are you did you sign the Global Recess Alliance statement? Did
I think I joined. That's kind of where I found you guys through, I believe, was through
So
there.
I have your email then, and so I'll reach out to you and I'll connect you and John, and just be, maybe it's just a matter of sharing ideas because he teaches.
And I missed the other thing I was going to ask you. I wanted to ask Debbie, but I guess I'd ask her that. What was her stance on ball play? I heard her talking about throwing the ball at the wall and the beanbags thing, but what is her stance on ball play at recess? I kind of missed that part.
So in the link schools at recess, they do not allow balls. And the reason for that, and I've observed it happen, I've observed link recess as well as obviously other recess. The reason for that is that especially in the United States, you give a kid a soccer ball and the only thing they know how to do with it is to play soccer, and they get all hell bent on making sure they follow the rules that they see on TV. You give them a football, they have to play football. You give them a baseball, they have to play baseball. So you lose the idea of creative play, and play can be competitive, but they get too stuck in the competitiveness and the rule following. So she takes the balls out so that they have to do other things, and then they engage with other children in different ways than they do when they're actually playing a sport. Doesn't mean they don't sometimes create football or soccer or baseball with other devices, but they don't allow projectile throwing either. So like kids will take out water bottles and they'll throw them, and then she's like, no, you don't throw stuff on the playground. That becomes a safety issue because, kids wailing around a water bottle could be kind of harmful. But that's the stance at recess in the link school. She's not opposed to ball, sports and ball playing. It's just a matter of
right.
And what happens in schools, and I've seen it happen. You give a kid a kickball, they play kickball. They don't know what else to do with it. They really do not know what else to do with it. And they have to play by the rules that they were taught. So
yeah.
Take some of that free play idea.
I wonder like, what about giving a soccer ball but not allowing a soccer game where they can pass the ball or a frisbee, or if you take out the context of the game?
Yeah, I think that could be instructed that way. That's one of the things that there's a researcher here in Kentucky, Aaron Beagley is his name, and he's developed a PE curriculum, that he does that is aligned with national PE standards. That is 4 or 5 weeks of recess games. So he uses his PE time and motor skill development, planning, goal development, all those PE learning outcomes and he teaches those and has the kids practice those through recess games. But a piece of that is also saying, when you go out to the playground, we were playing Foursquare, but you could play Foursquare with 3 people. You don't have to play it the way I taught you. You can be creative and morph these games. But because so many kids don't, especially older kids, where did you learn your games when you were a kid? You learned it from an older kid on the playground, right? Or your brother or your sister, or in your neighborhood. Not all kids have that experience. So he uses his PE time to instruct recess games. So in that case, you could give somebody a soccer ball and say, hey, you could play Foursquare with the soccer ball. You could do anything you want with a soccer ball. It doesn't have to be soccer, but that's just Debbie's fault, what they've done in the link schools.
Kathy, how do you feel about maybe doing like a interactive treasure hunt, like setting them up and getting their parents involved? Because it is difficult. I know it's difficult to say that their parents have the time, but if you're worried about them not taking that screen time or stepping away, maybe giving them something.
I don't want to sound nitty picky, but usually what happens in that is the kids that it's a great idea to do, but the kids that get involved with that are the kids you're not worried about or concerned about. It's the kids that are already outside and getting it. So it's like, how do I reach those kids that I'm concerned about that don't have that parent support? Because the parents that are willing to do a treasure hunt with their kids, I probably don't need to worry. I'm probably sure they're going outside enough and everything. It's more about that kid that plays video games all day, regardless of a COVID or not. And now with COVID, it's just making that habit even worse. So like, how do I reach them and actually have that time with them?
And that's
Such a true statement.
I don't have an answer to that, but we do have some resources with other. It's not about like I don't want to give you games and ideas. It's about I'm going to give you games and ideas, but you as Felicia and Chad can take this idea I just gave you and make it your own. Like I could say, hey, go play Batman and Robin. You might go out and say, no, I want to play Batgirl and PJ Masks, and But to Chad's point, the kids that are going to do that are the kids that I don't have to worry about telling to do that either.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have an answer for how do we reach the kids that we can't reach, because what do we do? How do we make them do it if we aren't with them? And
turn it into their video game. Ask them what video game they're into and say, okay, this is what you need to do. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't play video games, but I'm just thinking.
We shut down in March. From March to May, we were shut down. But there was no virtual teaching. There was nothing. It was just basically everything was on standstill, and we didn't know what was happening. So what I did is I saw a YouTube video with it was either a hockey or soccer player did a lava challenge where he moved throughout his whole house without touching the floor, and then finished off speeding away in his motorboat. So I had challenged my kids on Facebook to make, we called it the lava lawn challenge. So they weren't allowed to touch their grass, and they had to make an obstacle course, whatever they wanted, using any equipment they wanted. And we had 40 kids at school that did come back, and we got 30 videos were sent to me of families and parents building obstacle courses and kids not touching their lawn.
I love this idea.
The only flack I got was I forgot in my video to tell the kids that they had to pick up the course after they were done. That was the one flack I got from parents. They said they spent their afternoon picking up after their course.
Well, they could have sent their kid out there to do it themselves.
Yeah, I know. That's what they said. So we called it the lava lawn, and it was great. It went really well. So I was looking like things like, that gets some engaged, but again, it was the kids that I wasn't concerned about. But some did surprise me. I did get some that you wouldn't think would be into it, and they loved their courses. So
I think I take a look at the Asphalt Green resources and then the PlayWorks Play at Home resources.
I was kind of jotting down all those links and stuff that you guys were talking about. I just found you guys by going through internet stuff, looking for ideas and stuff, and then stumble upon it, and here I am.
They're live. When you get the PowerPoint from Felicia, all those links will be live to take you to those. I think, but also like you're the kind of teacher that you're out there seeking it and you're eager to like try something new. There's some teachers that are just so overwhelmed. The last thing they want to do is try to figure something out themselves. So that's when we need admin to say, these are the resources. This is how you're going to do it. Let me put you together with, hey, I'm going to put you with Chad because Felicia, you're feeling really overwhelmed, but work with Chad and you guys are going to work on this together. And then you bring each other up.
And that's why I'm here, just looking for more, because we have a meeting tomorrow with all the phys ed teachers from my school board. We're getting all together tomorrow to talk about the exact thing is what happens if we do go virtual. How are we going to act? And this will be one thing that I'm going to kind of bring and just talk about some of the things we talked about today and what to do. We talked about making PE kits for everybody so that they'd have PE kits at home in the event, a juggling ball, the scarf, skipping rope. So it's just a matter of trying to get everybody on the same page in our school board so that if it does hit, it's not panic and, well, what's he doing? What's she doing? Let's have a little conversation now so that we at least have the idea to get the ball rolling in the event.
Yeah,
we are very fortunate here that all of our administrators really believe in sport and play, and they push it to the max. I mean, we looked and we sent one of our guys down to Texas to go to see the Link schools.
Wow.
They went down and checked it out. The only big problem we have up here is winter and snowsuits. And the transition time to try to do 4 recesses, you lose way too much time.
To get all the gear on and
get all the gear on, head out, you come back in, your gear's soaking wet, and then you got to go back out in soaking wet gear. So it's the winter that puts it.
I would be curious, in Finland, where Pasi is from originally, they go out year round. They are bundled up. They, and those kids from like first grade on are getting their stuff on themselves. They're not, teachers not doing it. I don't,
Not,
but they have appropriate gear. I mean, like I'd say pretty much, unless you're in the northern states of the United States, like the Canadian border states, people here don't know how to dress for the winter time. I mean,
This is so
really
true.
I was laughing at your, what is that?
So true.
So I converted to Celsius. Your whatever your 3 degrees or whatever, you stay inside.
Yeah.
That's like
103.
Yeah, it's -10. It's not bad.
Oh my gosh.
Colder than I thought for us. Like
Uh,
I don't know what we translate to where we stay outside. Us it's like -25 with the wind chill, but that's in Celsius.
oh my
Oh,
gosh.
man. Yeah.
Oh,
So
thank you.
Finland is really that mindset of like, there is no bad weather. There's just inappropriate attire. You know, you put the right clothes on, you know.
Yeah, we just gotta watch for frostbite. That's
Oh
where
my gosh, these poor kids.
that's where we have to slow her down.
Oh my gosh. They could lose a finger. That's some real weather. Some serious weather.
Makes us strong.
Oh my gosh. Yikes.
Well, we have
Alright.
too long, Felicia.
I
Thank
gotta jump off and it's gonna shut you guys down if I do. So
I was just, if you can send me those links with those things you were talking about and the connections, maybe that phys ed teacher or whatever, just to touch base with, I would appreciate it. And thank you for
Yeah,
everything you've
so
done today.
if you registered and we have your email, all the information and the additional information, Kathy, that you'll send to us, that article will get sent out within the next 48 hours.
Okay.
And so you'll have everything.
And if you find that 6-minute video, I'd be more than happy to watch that. So
Yeah, we'll get
That's
that one
Debbie
too.
to get it to, I'm sure she's working on it right now to get it to you so that it can be
Okay,
shared.
that's perfect. All right, well, you guys have a great day.
thanks a lot from Canada, eh?
Thanks.
Have a great night.
Bye-bye.